Hey guys, welcome back. It's Big Shoulders. Today I wanted to talk about it's something that pops up every now and then, and it is something that I occasionally get a good razzing, ribbing, whatever you want to call it, about from my California family, and that is the Chicago accent or the Chicago accent, the dialect that we in Chicago speak. And it's something that I guess Californians don't think they have an accent, but they do. There's sort of like a laconic, almost atonal way that some of them talk. Of course, you have the Chicano accent. I've only heard the actual Valley Girl accent once, and that was when I was driving rideshare and I did pick up a young lady and dropped her off at a mall in Northridge. And that was about it. I was actually kind of shocked because I had not actually heard someone actually speak in that dialect. It really seems to be something that has been completely supplanted by the Kardashian upspeak. That is, I think, way worse. Anytime I hear it, I have to mute it or turn it off. It's god awful. Just my opinion. But to the Chicago accent, it is something that is quite unique. I have found when I'm with family, when I'm doing my time here in LA, if I am spending any significant amount of time on the phone with, say, my dad or my great aunt, other family members, if I'm on the phone for more than a half an hour, so 45 minutes, an hour or more, I do tend to come off of those calls speaking Chicagoese, if you will. And it's something that growing up, you hear it, I've heard it. What I think is so interesting is there are people that I know that were raised in the city, I mean, within the city limits of Chicago, that do not have that accent necessarily. I know people, of course, that do. I also know people who are technically on the outside of the Chicago city limits in, the south and southwest suburbs, places like Joliet, places like Lombard, which I guess is west, and other places. My stepfather, for example, was born and raised Joliet, and absolutely had what we would consider, if you heard him talk and did not know where he was born and raised. Again, Joliet, while it isn't Chicago, it is Chicagoland. They're all watching Cubs games and Sox games and Bears games and listening to, WGN and all of that. So it's a regional thing. It is certainly a Chicago accent, but it is a Chicagoland accent too. Because my stepfather absolutely had that. And he didn't say three, he said tree. And within that accent, THs become Ds. It's the guy, these guys over there, all of that. Whereas my dad, my dad has it, but it only comes out in certain words. My dad is pretty not so. I don't think how to explain it. There are Chicagoans that have the accent, but there are a fair number of Chicagoans that speak in what I think you can classify as standard American broadcasters English. It is what you would hear on WGN. It is what you would hear from a lot of broadcasters from the greater Midwest. That's kind of how people speak. And I had a lot of teachers that spoke that way. And I think that's partly why when I would go other places, New York, LA, Florida, Arizona, people wouldn't necessarily off the bat be able to catch where I'm from. Sometimes, if I get tired, I know that there were times where people could catch it when I was driving rideshare. I drove rideshare for a period of time in Chicago and then did it a bit longer in LA. So yeah, it does kind of depend. There is sort of that classic, where we elongate our vowels, THs become Ds, and so forth. There are others. There is a specific African American dialect as well, which I won't do for obvious reasons. I don't want to mangle it or offend anybody. It would be fun maybe at some point to sort of get people on to do all of them. But those are the three. It's sort of that standard, what I think tends to be associated with the Bridgeport neighborhood of Chicago. Um, Very sort of working class Irish American, but it is not by any means limited to the the Irish. I know Polish guys and Italians and you name it, Mexican Americans and Puerto Rican Americans that have that accent, which is cool. But apparently, there's been some guff, some talking down, some disrespect towards the Chicago accent, and I think, I mean, not that we really care, but I do feel it's important to defend the Chicago accent and regional accents in general. I love accents. I love it whether it be Chicano accents in LA, it be maybe a Southern drawl in places like Alabama or Texas. Um, I love Northeastern accents. I find them so interesting. Just the etymology of where these accents come from, where the dialects come from, I think is super cool. One person though in particular, and this is from a couple of years ago, but I think it's worth sharing. Hang on, let me grab my dog. Say hi, Cooks. Um, uh, this a woman here in Chicago, Anne Marie Saviano, did a really excellent job sort of defending and explaining to people what really is the Chicago accent. And again, I could sit here and talk and tell you what I think, and so on and so forth in the dialect. But I think, as fun as that would be, I really kind of want to explain what culturally the Chicago accent is, what it represents, why it is what it is. And she does so beautifully here. And I don't know why this is so hard to find. I found it through a LinkedIn. I think it's, yeah, her, oh, Ann Saviano. Okay. So her LinkedIn account, it doesn't seem to be posted anyplace else, which, yeah, it's too bad. But it's on her LinkedIn. Ann Saviano, by the way, she is an Emmy Award-winning comedy writer and television producer, segment producer. And this is what she had to say about, I guess, recent criticism of the Chicago accent. And she has this to say. And again, I realize I'm reading to you, and that doesn't necessarily make for great content, but trust me, the way she weaves her words, it really is beautiful. So I'm going to try to do her justice. And Ann Saviano's post here on the Chicago accent. I love this city, so I'm sharing something I wrote about her a while ago on the same date. The post went viral. That was really cool. Added a few things since then. The Chicago accent by Anne Marie Saviano. They say the Chicago accent is the worst in the world. I say the Chicago accent is mustard on your hot dog. It's running into your friends from grammar school at the bar the night before Thanksgiving. It's 16-inch softball. It's the guy on the block who gets out a snowblower and plows your sidewalk on your next door neighbor's sidewalk and doesn't stop until he's done everybody's, because why the hell not? You offer to pay him and he's like, get out of here. It's your dad who wakes up for work in the winter earlier than usual so he can clean off your windshield and scrape the ice off so you don't have to. It's your mom who stops at the Jewel to pick up Dean's half and half for her, just for her coffee, and it's on sale. She went there just for the creamer, but she got 2 of the coffee cakes just in case somebody stops by, because inevitably somebody's going to stop by. It's grown men holding each other and sobbing when the White Sox win the World Series in 2005. It's the same guys holding each other when the Cubs win the World Series, but for a different reason. It's bozo buckets. It's Channel 9. It's the illegal fireworks on the 4th of July. It's calling dibs. It's thin crust tavern style pizza from Obi's or Vito and Nick's. It's a Tuesday in April when it snows in the morning, but it's 74 and sunny an hour later. It's blizzards. It's above ground pools. It's a sausage sandwich. It's the Italian beef with giardiniera. It's yelling, come on, and swearing at people on the Stevenson Expressway because it's always a mess no matter what time of day it is. It's yelling, hey, Stan, out the window to your neighbor because you can basically reach out and touch each other since your brick bungalows are so close together. It's a lakefront in July. It's block parties. It's the guy selling cotton candy or tamales on Pulaski. It's the guy, you know the guy, the one who does that thing over there. It's a Maxwell Street Polish. It's the French room. It's a half bath off the kitchen. It's the paneled basement with a pool table from the 70s. It's the fireman who lives next to the cop who's married to the nurse and her mother, who's also a nurse married to a cop who lives down the street from her sister, who's a firefighter married to a cop. It's your teacher who grew up on the south side and moved to the north side because she's so fancy now. It's Archer Avenue. It's Weber's Bakery on Paczki Day. It's Taylor Street for Italian ice. It's Greektown and Chinatown and Bridgeport and Beverly and Ravenswood and Hyde Park and Portage Park and Garfield Ridge. It's you. It's me. It's all of us. It's a little bit rough around the edges, and it's not always pretty. But inside, it's pure heart. And that, my friends, is beautiful. And that is Chicago. Beautifully put by Anne Marie Saviano here. I don't know that I can add too much more to it. I think she really nailed it there. And this is a type of thing I think we really need, whether you're Chicago or you're anywhere else. I think sometimes it feels like we're in danger of losing the things that make us unique, our regional cultures, our regional dialects, our regional ways. And that's why I'm so vehement. It was really a few years ago after I'd spent enough time not living full time in Chicago, did I realize just how much I missed it. And it's something that I say, and I think I've said it on this channel, that you can take the guy out of Chicago, you can't take the Chicago out of the guy, and that's very true. There's a handful of folks, and I really don't want to name them, that are successful comedians in particular, or actors, that really seem to be embarrassed by Chicago and be embarrassed by where they're from, and that bums me out. And that's why I'm not naming them, because I don't want to give them any coverage, any free publicity, as it were. And then I look at places like New York, and there is when you hear a New York accent, a New York accent, you really do. And I would say you certainly know like a Texas drawl when you hear it. And I would say in recent decades, you kind of now know that sort of California Mexican Chicano accent, which I really love. God, I love Chicano so much. If it wasn't for Chicanos, like I really, everything bad that could possibly have fucking happened on my way out of Chicago, that is half of the money I save getting sucked up for bullshit, and then rolling in, and then the other half of that money getting sucked up due to just horrible circumstance and bullshit my first 3 months into LA. If it had not been for the Chicanos and the Dodger fans, I would have been in a world of fucking hurt. And so I will always hold Chicano culture, Chicano dialect, accents. It warms my heart. I love those people. I'm ride or die for those folks. I love East LA in the way I love specific parts of Chicago, because it's blue collar, it's working class, it's real, it's no frills, it's no bullshit. It's just so authentic and real and pure. And that's really kind of what has brought me around to for doing Big Shoulders, and why I felt it was really important to articulate why the Chicago accent should be held as high regard, and it seems to be getting there. With regard to, I'm about to finish season 3 of The Bear. God, what a great show. And one of the criticisms of The Bear, and I don't think it's a fair criticism, is, there aren't enough Chicago accents. I don't hear enough of our local guys, our local gals talking. And maybe, but not really. Plenty of Chicagoans speak the way I do. Non-regional, or maybe sort of basic Midwest. And some are more purely Chicago. One of the best examples of a Chicago accent, by the way, I would say the highest profile Chicago accent, Chicago dialect in all of entertainment and Hollywood. And he's a guy that I really, really love. He's one of my favorite comedians. He's so incredibly successful doing the thing that he does. is Sebastian Maniscalco. And I find it so interesting that he was in The Irishman uh, by Martin Scorsese with De Niro, and those the big titans of sort of Italian American cinema. And what I love about the fact that he slid in there so easily is that there seems to be a fair amount of people that can't tell the difference between a Chicago accent and a New York accent, which I find interesting. I mean, there's resonance between the two. They're not the same. Anybody who really listens can tell that they're not the same, but it's something that not everyone picks up on that. Everybody's ears are different. Some are more keenly attuned to those things than some aren't. But I realized something too, that it was Dennis Franz, the great Chicago actor Dennis Franz, who was in NYPD Blue, was in films like Dress to Kill. He always played a New York cop, which I thought was really great, or a New York detective. He was really good at those things. I think he showed up in another Paul Schrader film. I'm blanking on it, mid '80s, another sort of thriller noir. But I can't remember a time where anybody has pointed out, say, hey, that guy's supposed to be from New York. Why does he sound like he's from Chicago? And nobody really catches on, which I think is kind of cool. I think because his dialect, his accent is so unique to him. And again, the Chicago accent, a lot like the New York accent, is clearly no nonsense, blue collar sounding. It doesn't sound like RP British. That's super refined, and I guess that's kind of what I love about it. But you can take a guy like Maniscalco and slide him into a Scorsese film with De Niro. You can take Dennis Franz and slide him into roles playing a New York City detective in feature films, and for years on NYPD Blue, and nobody bats an eye, which I think is kind of cool. That's something that I did notice in the time that I moved from Chicago to New York. Worked in New York for a period of time. It was a much easy. It was almost a completely seamless transition, because Chicago and New York are truly America's only two real metropolises. This massive skyscraper laden, connected by rail, subway, and elevated train type of cities. And so in both cities, you can go without a car. In both cities, you're no more than 10 feet away from a snack and a coffee or a corner store. And so culturally, it was a real easy transition, dipping my toe into LA and sort of planting my flag in LA was a little different, because LA is kind of, it's as if you took a city like Chicago or New York and just unfolded it and kept unfolding it until it was a massive sort of sprawling area. So, LA has its downtown, it has its skyscrapers, it does have a metro system that doesn't really connect most of the city. So those things are there, but you have to have a car, and it's super easy to be sort of cocooned in your car and siloed up in your neighborhood in LA. And so it did take twice as long to really get a sense of LA than it did New York, being a Chicago guy coming from Chicago. And I really have to say, I love all three cities. They all have their own thing going on. I really do not understand this need on the part of people from different cities to denigrate other people's cities. I don't get it all. So it might not be your bag. It might not be something that that vibes with you. Okay, fine. But I don't think there's ever a reason to attack people's cities. If you don't like the place, you don't have to go there. You don't have to live there. You don't have to visit. I'm reminded of this punk who I don't know his name, and nor would I give his name if I could remember it, who recently hopped on social media, and he's a New Yorker, and how embarrassing for him, because again, New York, man, you guys have a great city. You've got a great culture there, creative vibe, food scene, entertainment. Again, New York is great. I love New York. I love New York people. And so really it hurt my heart and disappointed me that this young punk from New York felt the need to come to Chicago, and his entire video series was Chicago food is trash. And I was like, okay, you're completely morally dishonest, and you're intellectually dishonest. You did no research. You clearly don't understand, or you're evading the fact that Chicago is one of the world's great culinary hubs. You're doing it for the clicks. You're doing it to get a rise out of people. You're doing it to be a troll, and that's really sad because you could be doing something good. You could be doing something uplifting. You could be doing something, where we're extending hands from New York to Chicago and finding similarities and appreciating differences. But this young man decided not to do that, and it's too bad because for as long as those videos are up, he's going to be this asshole. If people can disagree with one another, we can have strong, vehement disagreements, but to purposely go out of your way to shit on people and their cities or their food or whatnot, I don't really understand. And it's funny because I've shown those videos to a few people who are not Chicagoans and have spent time there, and they're just like, yeah, none of it rings true at all. And again, New Yorkers, you guys are, I mean, you guys have won on so many levels. I really love New York cinema, especially from the '70s and '80s. It's something that is very close to the Chicago feel and all of that. You guys have a bit more on film than we do. Hopefully that's changing now. Chicago has figured out how to start bragging about itself, which is nice. But yeah, there's no reason for that. Massive difference between Chicago and LA, of course. But I came to LA with optimism and positivity, and like, no, I'm going to find the things about LA that I really like. I'm going to figure out what the locals do, what did the locals eat, what did the locals drink, and learn to appreciate that. I don't understand these folks that come either from the Midwest or the Northeast and go to places like LA or San Francisco or Miami or whatever, do nothing but complain about why it isn't like where they're from. It's like, because it's not where you're from, dude. It's LA. Get a burrito and go on a hike, as Bill Burr has said. But yeah, and that brings me a long way around to the Chicago accent. I do appreciate the fact that it's getting more and more pronounced in shows like The Bear. It doesn't have to be everything, though. I think even in shows like Shameless, it was there, but it wasn't there all the time. And that was a show that was set on the south side of Chicago. So yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I do find it funny that Matty Matheson's character on The Bear, and I believe Matty Matheson is Canadian, and I can hear his Canadian accent come out on the parts of words, and nobody bats an eye. And I can't give those folks too hard of a time because we actually have a ton of Canadians that are honorary Chicagoans, and that has to do with the Second City connection, because Second City obviously was birthed out of Chicago, but not too far into its history, it established a Toronto location, and the Second City Toronto is as well known as Second City Chicago. Second City Toronto gave us honorary Chicagoans like the great Harold Ramis, who we all know from Ghostbusters, who I think he did. I don't know if he did stuff in Toronto, but I'm absolutely certain he did stuff at Chicago, but was Canadian. He lived in the Chicago suburbs. May he rest in peace. But yeah, Harold Ramis is an honorary Chicagoan. We have John Candy is certainly an honorary Chicagoan. Cannot forget Dan Aykroyd. He is one half of the Blues Brothers. There's a guy who is a Canadian through and through, and is absolutely hand in glove, fits as a Chicago guy. You can't be Elwood Blues and not plug into that culture. And he really, obviously, him being a huge jazz, blues, funk fan, a music fan as he is, that really sort of gave him, I think, that soul connection into the character of Elwood Blues and what the Chicago ethos was. And so there's, and I've got to rewatch it. I just sort of lose myself because I love the film so much. Blues Brothers from 1980, directed by also the great John Landis. There are times where he clearly is speaking Chicago, and then there's times where it's like I can't. Like he's almost splitting the difference between Chicago and Canadian. Maybe not. Again, I'm not critiquing Dan Aykroyd's acting ability at all. I absolutely love the guy. He is in the nucleus of my childhood. He's near and dear to me. I love seeing him in the new Ghostbusters movies as well. I adore Dan Aykroyd. But it's one of those things where even Canadians appreciate the Chicago accent. I'm not sure where. I didn't do a drill down on who was criticizing the Chicago accent as being the worst in the country, prompting Ann Saviano's beautiful response and defense here. But it doesn't matter. Chicagoans, we don't care. We absolutely don't care. That's one thing I also really admire about our city, about our culture, is we're so busy just being dope and making our food and brewing our drinks and our coffee and doing our thing, and our street art and making money downtown and everywhere else. We just don't care. There's so much great stuff going on. And it's like, you don't like it, get lost, Jagoff. Jagoff, by the way, that's I'm almost certain is a Chicago dialect word. And I kind of forgotten about it. Again, watching this new season of the Bear, Jagoff has come up quite a bit, and it's great because it doesn't show up as a curse at all. And I think I'm going to bring it back hard because it's what a Jagoff. It's something you can say that isn't as harsh as other words you can call people MF or whatever, or worse words. But it has the bite. It has that edge to it. What a Jagoff. Without people, it's not going to trigger any censorship AI. I don't think. We'll see as this episode goes up. But yeah, I just wanted to share with you this beautiful defense and appreciation of the Chicago accent by Ann Saviano. Share with you a little bit of the culture there. There have been a few articles about there being some type of danger of the Chicago accent going away, and I gotta tell you, I don't know where these people hang out in the city necessarily, because I absolutely hear it. I hear it on the west side. I hear it on the south side. I even hear it I hear it in Evanston, and that's literally Chicagoans. Boom, there's Evanston. And I've heard it in the northwest suburbs, so it's not going away. I have uncles that still sound solidly that way. There's a couple of young guys that I know that sound that way. Certainly, the Teamsters. The guys that work with their hands sound that way. And then there's the guys that work with their hands that don't. And I know white collar people who have the thick accent. So it's one of those things where you can't necessarily pigeonhole it. It does tend to be, a particular type of sort of blue collar guy, you will hear this in places like Bridgeport, but you'll also hear it in places, and I've heard it on the west side too. But I think the Chicago accent is beautiful. Maybe I'm a little biased, but I do. I'm glad to see it pop up more. I was happy to hear it more in this recent season of The Bear. So if you do happen to speak the dialect and you have the accent, don't feel the need to change that at all. You go and have your sausage sandwich. Pull up the TV in the French room and have an old style and watch the Bears lose probably. And yeah. I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for hanging with me. If there are if I'm missing anything, if I somehow have missed a Chicago accent, if I've missed anything here, please comment below. And also, if you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share. I think about 92% of you are still not subscribed, but you keep coming back and watching, so I'm appreciative. If you could hit that subscribe button, I'd be eternally grateful. Help me build the channel here so we can do more cool stuff. Got some stuff planned early fall that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. And again, I'm doing my best here to bump up these production values, and I appreciate your sticking with me. But in the meantime, yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.